Racism is abhorrent. It is ugly. We reject it. It is a toxic cancer wherever it is. I think we all accept that. Of course we do. But have you ever noticed that our country only seems to be outraged by certain types of racism? Certain types of racism. Now, we'll get to the differences, but first, what happened in Buffalo was a terrible, horrible, violent, racist attack. It certainly looks like. There's the alleged killer. We don't include his name. Sometimes they want to be famous, 10 killed, 3 injured, live streamed the shooting, fired 50 rounds, and left behind a pretty massive dossier that spells out the ugliness of his mind and the hateful nature of his attack. Racism. Let's go through it, please. This is what this young man allegedly wrote on his computer. Every day that goes by without an attack, hundreds of more non-whites immigrate to white countries and spawn children. He hates this. A black man or woman choosing to invade our lands, live on our soil, live on government support, and attack and replace people. Yes, he writes, I dislike them. I hate this guy, by the way. It would have eased me if I knew all the blacks I would be killing were criminals or future criminals. But then I realized all black people are replacers just by existing in white countries. Now, this is as awful and ugly as it gets. And this part of the mainstream media coverage, I'm perfectly fine with. And I totally agree with.
A white teenager carried out a racist attack on Saturday at a supermarket in a predominantly black neighborhood.
Pure evil. 10 people shot and killed at a Buffalo supermarket in a racist rampage.
10 people were murdered on Saturday in a racist massacre at the Top supermarket in Buffalo, New York.
Disturbing new details about how police say the suspect in Saturday's racist mass shooting in Buffalo, New York, planned to continue his rampage.
Now, I could point out that, hey, allegedly the presumption of innocence, but the evidence is overwhelming. It looks like this guy is the shooter, and his record of horrible racism is right there for all of us to see. And this was, by all accounts, a racially motivated attack. That part of the coverage, fine. The next part of the coverage, no. Completely unacceptable. And you know where they're taking this. And this is where the selective outrage comes in. It's a white person who took out people of color. A horrible event. That's not bad enough. Now they're going to link it to people who are totally innocent. People on the political right of this country, conservatives, so that somehow the dialogue, that somehow Donald Trump has something to do with this moment.
As you know, this isn't just a fringe theory on the corner of the internet. It's being pushed by right-wing media personalities and some political figures.
We have this toxic stew of this growing right-wing ideology, easy access to guns, and our permissive internet culture that sort of rewards sharing some of this violent ideas.
This type of rhetoric doesn't just exist in the dark corners of the internet anymore. Over the last few years, these ideas have been mainstreamed by conservative television personalities and Republican politicians.
Now, that's a lie. That is not true. That is utterly and totally false. And we'll go through it in detail how it is false. You already know that's not what Trumpers are about. That's not what MAGA is about. Not about racism. By the way, some of the heroes of the MAGA movement happen to be people of all colors, all gender, all orientations, you name it. And this guy, this 18-year-old kid in Buffalo, was trolling in the dark corners of the internet. Let's take a look. This is, I started browsing 4chan, he writes, in May of 2020 after extreme boredom. Remember, this was during the outbreak of COVID. Okay, now I'll tell you this. I've heard of 4chan. I have never been there. Have you? What is it? How do you access it? I have no idea. What else did he write about where he got his ideas? From there, I also found other sites like worldtruthvideos.website, dailyarchives.org, and dailystormer.cn, where through data and exposure to real information, I learned the truth. I don't know what he's talking about. Do you? I'm as conservative and MAGA as they come, and I don't know what he's talking about. And oh, by the way, we'll find out where other mass shooters got their motivation in a little bit. So this is ugly stuff. Obviously, it is very, very bad. But look at the reaction. Look who they're trying to pin it on. This is our accidental governor, Hochul.
So let's just be real honest about the role of elected leaders, and what they need to be doing is calling this out and not coddling this behavior and saying that that's just young people and they're sharing their ideas. Yeah, I'll protect the First Amendment any day of the week, but you don't protect hate speech. You don't protect incendiary speech. You're not allowed to scream fire in a crowded theater. There are limitations on speech, and right now we have seen this run rampant.
Everybody knows you're not supposed to say fire in a crowded theater. But incendiary speech, who's going to define that? All right, this is typical government overreach by a desperate to be elected in her own right former lieutenant governor who became an accidental governor. And oh, by the way, even before the internet, you could go to the library and get books. Well, if you wanted to, you could find a book by Adolf Hitler, right? They were in the library before the internet, and they're still there. By the way, this kid obviously deranged and mixed up. If he didn't hit the store with people of color, he was going to hit his high school, apparently, where it was 95% white.
New York state officials say that Gendron had threatened a shooting at his high school last year.
The individual was brought in for a mental health evaluation. He was evaluated and then he was released.
The suspect was never flagged as an extreme risk under the state's red flag law that could have prevented him from purchasing a gun.
He had plans for shooting up his high school, his overwhelmingly white high school. This person has serious, serious problems, and he's probably going to be in jail for the rest of his life. But nobody wants to hear about that, at least the left. The mainstream media, Democrats, our culture, milk whatever power you can out of this by playing up the white supremacy angle.
This is basically a situation where we have to talk about it. We got to raise it. We got to talk about white supremacy. We got to talk about the radicalization of kids in this country. We cannot do a both side argument on this one here, because if we don't begin to address what is happening, it's going to continue to happen.
Nobody wants this to continue to happen, but we are going to talk about both sides, because the other side of this equation is far more dangerous and far more prevalent than white supremacy, as awful and ugly as it is. And we have not been honest about that as a country. Shall we go back to Waukesha, Wisconsin? Do you remember what happened there? Allegedly, this man drove his vehicle into a Christmas parade, killed 6 people, injured 60 others. Here it is. Here's the video. Boom, right through there. And the racial component of this was downplayed. This man was said to be furious over the acquittal of Kyle Rittenhouse. That's what motivated him, yet everyone seems afraid to talk about it. And when he was arrested, race was never mentioned.
And with that tragedy in Wisconsin, where a man drove his SUV into a Christmas parade, at least 5 people were killed and more than 40 injured.
We learned today that the driver, now facing intentional homicide charges, was out on bond after he allegedly punched the mother of his child and intentionally ran her over with the same vehicle at a Milwaukee gas station earlier this month.
NBC News has confirmed that the person of interest, the driver in this case, his name is Daryl Brooks. He's 39 years old. From Wisconsin right now. So far, he's not been charged with a crime. He's just being called a person of interest.
Person of interest, driver. I heard motorist in a lot of reports. At one point, it sounded like the vehicle was driverless. Now, they've been very dishonest in their coverage, and a lot of them felt like they were in an awkward position. Now, let's take a look at these 2 individuals, the Waukesha driver on the left and the shooter in Buffalo on the right. We already established where the shooter from Buffalo was going, 4chan, crazyweatherstorm.com, websites that we've never heard of, that most people don't go to. What may have motivated the Waukesha driver? Maybe just turning on MSNBC.
It gets to the point of the systemic racism that exists in this country that permeates every social system that we have here.
Everything in this country's governance has its roots in racism. This country was built on the enslaved and stolen land.
Racism is systemic, it is structural, it is pervasive.
Racism is built into the fabric of our society. There's environmental racism, educational racism, the foods that we eat, the healthcare that we receive.
There is systemic racism that must be weeded out.
We've got to deal with the issues of systemic racism throughout our society.
Racism exists in the DNA of America, and the only way that we're going to deal with it is to confess our sins.
Wow. So if you're like fired up to begin with and you just turn on the TV, I could see this motivating people like that Waukesha driver, motorist. Couldn't you? Why go to the bowels of the internet? Just turn on the TV. It's all there. And if you don't like MSNBC, well, other programming like Joe Biden. Just watch the White House channel or the YouTube channel of the White House or anything that's coming from our political figures.
We've seen with horrifying clarity the cost of systemic racism.
We have a system that is built on systemic racism, and we have to dismantle that system piece by piece.
It is time we face up to the reality of systemic racism in all of its forms.
Racism is systemic, it is structural, it is pervasive.
And it goes on like this, all right? Some of these are actually repeats, but it goes on and on and on like this. What really gets them upset? I'll tell you what doesn't get them upset, quite frankly, white victims. Let's take a look at Waukesha, right? These are the people who died, elderly too. And that young kid, look at that, Jackson Sparks, just 8 years old. Now take a look at Atlanta. By the way, victims, no matter what they look like, break our hearts, especially in something horrific like a mass shooting or that parade massacre. But look at that. They were Asian at a time where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris wanted to make an issue out of anti-Asian attacks that they falsely said were coming from Donald Trump's mood setting for America. So they flew to Atlanta to try to exploit it. Now, in Buffalo, the victims are primarily of color, actually exclusively all of color. Guess where Joe Biden is going tomorrow? He didn't go to Waukesha. He's going to Buffalo, firing up Air Force One. It's too bad that we're having such a dishonest and warped discussion about race in this country. Law enforcement can't even use the appropriate terms. Have you ever heard of BIE, Black Identity Extremism? It's real, but the FBI can't talk about it anymore because Democrats in Congress got mad. They yelled at the FBI director, and now they can't talk about it. But it is a real thing, and it goes back many years. Let's talk about it if they won't. Ready? Here are some of the worst episodes of this. 1993, the Long Island Railroad shooting. 6 people killed, 19 injured by Colin Ferguson. Racial prejudice, a factor. 2009, the Binghamton, New York shooting. Vietnamese immigrant Chivalry Wong felt disrespected due to his ethnicity. 13 people killed. 2009, Lakewood, Washington shooting. Killed 4 police officers. Said he planned on killing police. Said to be racially motivated. We can go on like this, and we will. 2010, the Hartford distributors shooting. 8 people killed, 2 injured. Racism, he said, he experienced at the workplace. 2013, the California rampage. 4 killed, 2 were police officers. Wrote manifesto declaring war on LAPD due to race. 2013, the Navy Yard shooting, 12 killed, 3 injured. Claimed to be a victim of discrimination in the Navy, believed to be racially motivated. 2016, the Dallas shooting, 5 police officers killed, 9 officers injured. Stated he wanted to kill white people, especially white officers. 2017, Burnett Chapel shooting, 1 killed, 6 injured, tied to black supremacy groups. Indicated attack was revenge for 2015 Charleston church shooting. 2019, the Jersey City grocery store shooting, 5 people killed, 3 injured, including 2 police officers connected to extremist groups, history of anti-Semitic and anti-cop posts. 2021, the Boulder supermarket shooting, 10 people killed, 1 police officer killed. This man felt bullied, he said, for being a Muslim. Joe Biden did not go to that scene. Neither did he go to Waukesha, Wisconsin. We talked about that. Darrell Brooks involved, allegedly, 6 killed. In 2022, just a few weeks ago, the New York City subway attack, 23 people injured, 10 shot. For years, Frank James was posting racist rants on social media. Not a word about that in the mainstream media. Whenever they find out that someone who looks like this is involved, interest suddenly evaporates. It's unfair to everybody because all lives matter, right? Huh, Joe Biden? No. He only goes to the scene. He only chooses to lead when he can score political points. And right now, for his own warped reasons, scoring political points means driving this woke, left-wing, sick ideology that America is systemically racist and infested with white supremacy. This from a guy who made that solemn promise on Inauguration Day.
Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation.
He wants us at each other's throats. It's not going to work, Joe Biden. I know you're trying, but it's not going to work.